I'd just like to kindly welcome Jeffrey Verity Schofield to the channel. Jeff has been one of my big inspirations for a while. He has one of the best and most informative YouTube channels out there. So if you're not aware of his work, definitely check it out. He's also the author of two very successful and extremely impressive books. One of them is called Sweat, and the other one I've just done a review on it recently called Resurrecting Your Gains. And I've just got to say, like, I read a lot of books, Jeff, and the content of that book just stood head and shoulders over everything else that I've read in the past few years of different training books and manuals. Like, if people don't buy this book, no matter what level they're at, they're truly doing themselves a disservice because, like I said in my review, it's basically a guide to unfucking your program and revealing those blind spots. And if you we all have them, like you said, and we all run to a plateau sooner or later. So I just say kudos for such an excellent work.
Oh, I appreciate that. A lot of hard work went into both books. I mean, they both took probably 2 or 3 years to write each. And, it's some people put out products every week or every few months. But for me, like a lot of hard work and thought and consideration goes into them. So, I really do appreciate that. And basically everyone is going to plateau at some point. So many people, they think they're done. They have lifted sometimes as little as a year or two, and they think they are finished or they're at a limit or something. But in reality, there are almost always at least small things that you can do to keep making progress. And often there are the big things, right? I see people who are plateaued, but their sleep is terrible, either in terms of quality or quantity, or they don't know how to manage their stress. Their self-reported stress is like an 8 out of 10. And then I look at their life and I'm trying to understand like where the stress is coming from. It's just that they're really up in their own mind and they overthink things and they just get, anxious easily. And, those are things that you can work on. It's not just, oh, I'm genetically anxious or something. That might play a role, but there are always things that you can do to manage and to mitigate that. Then in terms of programming structure, a lot of people, they are simply either experimenting too much or not willing to experiment at all. So either they're program hopping or they've been on the same program for a year and then they plateaued. Well, if you're on the same program for a year, a plateau is not unexpected. If you have the same exercises, the same sets, the same reps, and you're bumping up against a wall, after a year, I mean, that's kind of par for the course, right? A year is actually a long time to make progress before stalling. That's good going. But people need to be able to make these small changes and then observe and see what works or what doesn't, right? Too many people want to know the answer before they even try. So they'll say, oh, like, should I do this? My answer is usually, unless it's really dumb or dangerous, just try it out. Just try it out, experiment, and try to see if it works or not. You won't always know the answer before you try it. In fact, usually you won't. And I've done stuff that on paper, was going against the science or against common wisdom, even seemed illogical, and yet it seemed to work. It didn't really make sense sometimes, but sometimes adding in, isolation movements for sets of 5 or 6, or doing compounds for sets of 20 to 30 actually worked really well. And you hear the logic of, oh, compounds, lower reps, isolations, higher reps. And that's not a bad rule of thumb, but it's not always going to work for every single person. So usually when I see someone plateauing, diet as well. Diet is going to be a big one. You see people who are, 9% body fat and underweight, and they're like, man, my bench just won't move. Well, you're 110 pounds. Like, you have to add weight at some point, right? And so, under eating, usually it's not under eating protein, I've found. Most people are hitting enough protein to make growth, to make gains to grow. Usually it's calories. Calories, sometimes food quality as well, sometimes meal timing, but generally it's just the amount of food, of energy that they're intaking. And yes, some people do better on higher protein, but I haven't seen that to be the limiting factor most of the time.
I think what's been really impressive in regards to your own physique development, because you're actually a natural as well, so that makes your gains that you've been able to develop recently, because they're extremely stark and remarkable. I've seen tremendous progress on your, visual timeline. And I've noticed that, like, you've kind of embraced the whole kind of bulking up, not to a sloppy extent by any means, but definitely adding a little bit more weight. It's all subjective, right? But, and then, as you're doing now, you're leaning out and dieting back down, and the progress that you can see is nothing short of phenomenal. And you've really shown us that, you can definitely bust plateaus that way. So what do you think in regards to that?
I think bulking is necessary for most people, and the leaner you are, the more important it's going to be. So if someone is already 20, 21, 22% body fat, I don't advise bulking. It's just not necessary. You already have enough energy on your frame, more often than not. And I think if you go beyond that point, it's not that your body is it's just not going to partition it the way you want in a lot of cases. And I know there's been some debate again about the P ratio and is it actually a thing? Do you actually have to be leaner in order to make lean gains? But I do think that just for your health, for aesthetics, you don't want to go beyond around 20 to 22% body fat. Now, this is going to vary a little bit. Some people seem to, maybe it's 18%, maybe it's 23%, but generally I don't like getting too sloppy myself personally. We lift to look good. We lift to be healthy. We lift to be functional, even though I don't really like that word, but we don't lift to get sloppy. And maybe if your goal is powerlifting or strongman or something, football linebacker or something like that, sure, it makes sense to go a little bit thicker in terms of gains. But for most people, I like to call a bulk 20, 22% body fat or so. And this can be a tough conversation to have, because I've had people where they're assessing themselves at 14% because they have a little bit of abs. And I'm like, well, your waist is very thick. You don't really have any definition anywhere. You're probably already low 20s in body fat. And they're like, oh, I was going to bulk. Well, if you have to bulk to make gains when you're already 20, 21, 22% body fat, it's probably a sign that the program needs work, right? Because you can have a shitty program and just out eat that, and you'll probably make some gains, right? But I would say in that case, it's better off focusing on the program and the effort and other things rather than just, eat more and get that growth, right? Yeah, your bench will always go up if you put on 20 pounds of body weight. Always, every single time, right? It's a sure thing. But is that really the best overall answer? Sometimes you are covering over, you're smoothing over the cracks in the house of your programming from just eating too much, right? But then it also goes both ways, right? There are some people where they need to eat more. They're underweight, their goal physique is much heavier and much more muscular, and they're already lean, and they need to just pick up the fork, basically.
That's great to hear. Yeah, definitely some timely old school advice there as well. Just in regards to the perennial question of training hard enough, we constantly hear from some of the industry sound bites: train harder than last time, and you've got to train harder. Back in the 90s, we were told that we were training too hard, and now it seems to have flipped 180, and people are being told that they're not training hard enough. But it's such a nebulous concept and very subjective in terms of what hard training looks like. So from your point of view, how can somebody practically assess whether they're training hard enough or not?
I would say the biggest one is going to be bar speed slowdown. So if everything else seems like you're training hard, but you're not seeing any slowdown in bar speed, it's probably not actually very close to failure. And this is going to vary based on the individual a little bit. This is going to vary based on the lift a little bit. For example, something like a close grip bench press, it is less grindable. So what I mean by that is that you won't see as much slowdown gradually compared to some other lifts. So a close grip bench press, I've seen this, many other people have seen this, I've seen this in clients where everything will seem to be going smoothly, and then there will be one rep where you'll just fail, right? And so in that case, you might not see It'll be a very sharp slowdown, right? Or it'll slow down so much you just fail. This also does seem to be a little bit individual. I've seen people where I would have thought it was 3 or 4 reps in reserve. In reality, for them, it was 1 rep in reserve or even 0 reps in reserve. So some people are just able to grind through the reps a little bit more easily. And I would say I'm in that camp. I'm a grinder, basically, where I'm able to get more and more reps, even though it looks like I was done 3 or 4 reps ago. So it is a little bit individual, but I would say most people, if you think you're done, you might not be done, especially on some lifts that lend themselves to grinding a little bit more. Something like an incline dumbbell curl, failure, again, like the close grip bench press, it might come out of nowhere. It might just be, 2-second concentric, 2-second concentric, 2.5-second concentric, and then you're done, right? So it just sort of shows up out of nowhere. On other lifts, it might be 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, and then you're done, right? But if you've never, ever in your life had a rep that lasted more than like 4 seconds, you're probably not actually training to 0 reps in reserve. And I know a lot of people who they claim to train to failure, but they don't actually fail. So they get a hard rep, they stop the set, and they're like, yeah, that was failure. Well, you succeeded. You succeeded, so it wasn't exactly failure because you didn't fail, right? And so I think failure is not necessary, but on the safe lifts, on these isolations, on these machines, on these lifts where they're not axially loaded, the risk is very, very low, the fatigue is not super high. I regularly fail lifts. I mean, I would say I've failed something every single session for the past 2 or 3 years.
Is that failure sometimes?
What's that?
I was going to say, is that failure sometimes inadvertent, or is it intentional, or?
It would be inadvertent on something like a bench press or a squat, where there's no benefit to failing. It's annoying if you fail a bench press. You have to roll the bar off of you. It leaves bruises and stuff. On a squat, you have to take the plates off, power clean it back up, put the plates back on. So on those, if I fail, yeah, it's inadvertent every time because I don't want to fail, and it's either dangerous or it's excessively risky or it's just annoying. But on something like a chest supported row, yes, it is intentional. So I'm trying to train beyond failure because it's most difficult in the contracted position. And so I will use full range of motion until I fail to get that full range of motion, and then I will just keep going. I'll be trying to get full range of motion. I will just be beyond technical failure due to the fatigue. So a lot of people will stop their rows as soon as they miss that top part of the range of motion, but they still could get the bottom 99%, and then the bottom 95%, and then the bottom 90%, then the bottom 80%. And sometimes I'll just go until I can't even really bend my arms.
Right. So maybe the Tom Platz method in a way there, how he just used to pulse the weight there at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's very, very effective once you are used to it. Obviously build up to it, don't just, people should progress gradually, but I've gotten to the point where I can do this on 20, 25, 30 sets for back or more per week, right? And all the sets are beyond failure. Varying degrees beyond failure, but basically all of my rows are beyond failure and a lot of my vertical pulls as well. And I think this is not necessary for most people, but I'm very resistant, need a lot of volume and a lot of overall work if I want to grow. And I've seen good results from this. Obviously, I'm a little bit of an outlier here, so people should keep that in mind, and they should progress gradually, and they should be observant with what works for them. But for me, I have found this to be very, very useful. And I can't even imagine at this point for me keeping reps in reserve for rows. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm usually 3 reps beyond failure, 5 reps beyond failure, sometimes even 8 or 10 reps beyond failure. And it's beyond technical failure. On these lifts, technical failure just isn't that challenging because you're only missing a tiny little, it's genuinely maximum effort, but you're only missing that tiny little slice of the range of motion. So I don't really see a reason a bent over row is very dangerous. But the odds of getting hurt on a bent over row are going to be higher than a chest supported row.
That's very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of food for thought there. So just in regards to, you talked a lot about the different behaviors and habits that people can abide by when they're doing the training. But like a lot of the things that it's really missed these days is the mental side of training, I feel, especially with a lot of these self-defeating and self-fulfilling prophecies of, natty or not kind of thinking, or natural limitations. Can you comment a little bit maybe on some of the strategies that people can do to improve their sort of like mental focus in the gym?
Sure. I mean, one thing that might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, especially given my profession, is I think sometimes not using social media could be a decent option. Before social media, people didn't have access to a lot of information, which in some ways was a bad thing, but maybe in some ways was a good thing as well, because they didn't really necessarily think about everything so much, right? They were literally forced to just go into the gym and try stuff and observe and see what worked. Or they would just talk to people in person, or they would just look at other people training and say, oh, well, this guy has a freaking huge back. He's doing this. Let me try that as well. And so it's, I think sometimes people overthink things nowadays. They've started to compare themselves to other lifters. And I've noticed a lot of people are really, really goal focused over process focused. So they're obsessed with, when can I get this? How can I get this? I want to look like this. This is my goal. And yet they're not as focused on how they're going to get there. They're not as focused on that process, on those day-to-day details that are really going to decide how you make progress. And so I probably wouldn't worry about the natural limit as well. When I at all, like, don't even really think about it. It's not something that I think about on a regular basis. I'm not like trying to get to a certain number in terms of fat-free mass index or lean body mass or arm measurements. I'm just trying to do the best I can every single year, every single month, every single day, every single session, every single set. I'm just trying to get the most out of my training. And I'm not necessarily worried about where I will end up or how I compare to other people, right? And I think that is something that is very, very useful, because it is a long-term process. It is going to take time, and it does require patience. It does require delayed gratification. And if you're too focused on that goal, it's going to be super rare that someone actually puts in the time and puts in the effort. I enjoy my training. I enjoy my sessions, and I work hard, and I do have some goals in the back of my mind. And I think it's important to have a vision and some kind of long-term direction of where you want to go. But that is not the main focus on a day-to-day basis.
So it's definitely more process orientation for you, rather than like, a visualized outcome that you have like a benchmark that you need to achieve at a certain time. Take each workout as it comes, so to speak. Jeff, probably to help you write your books, you probably see a fair amount of feedback from your training and your coaching clients. I'm just wondering, have you ever had a coach yourself?
No, I've coached myself the entire time. And, it's not something that I'm necessarily opposed to. And I think that if I wanted to pursue some kind of side project, like if I really wanted to maximize my powerlifting or something, squat, bench, deadlift, I probably would consider a coach. I might mess it up first myself just to see, how things go. Just because that's kind of my personality. I would prefer to go it alone, at least initially. But I do think it helps to get a second pair of eyes on things. And if you look at a lot of professional athletes, they have coaches, almost all of them. And this isn't necessarily to keep them accountable. That's why a lot of, general population people, they get a coach for accountability. It's to hold them back. So a lot of professional athletes, they'll train themselves into the absolute ground. And I've been there. I've trained twice a day. I've trained 3 times a day. I've genuinely experienced overtraining. And, a lot of professional athletes, they are just super driven, highly obsessive people who need someone to tell them to just chill out, or you're going to be doing this and no more. And, most people, they don't have the ability to overdo things. They don't have the ability to overtrain, right? When someone typically says they are overtrained, what they mean is, I'm tired. Or what they mean is like, oh, my progress is slowing. But real overtraining is, it's something that lasts months. It's something where you dug so deep of a hole that you hate training, but you're still doing it because it's this obsessive habit. And your feet hurt when you wake up in the morning. You have systemic chronic inflammation. Your performance is in the gutter. I've heard people who are overtraining, but they're still setting PRs. That's not overtraining, right? Overtraining is when you are completely messed up and you need months of rest to even get yourself back to a hormonal baseline, right? So most professional athletes, they have a coach to hold them back and to have them do something reasonable, and also just to get a second pair of eyes on things, because education is important, knowledge is important, and I think that's probably the reason why I would get a coach, just to have a second opinion. So if I ever got a coach, it would probably be more like a consultation type of thing, where I'm still in charge, but maybe I'm just asking their opinion on something, because that's just how I am. I don't like giving up control over things that are important to me. So, I don't outsource anything on my YouTube channel because I don't trust other people to do that. I would rather just do the editing, the thumbnails, everything. The script, like some YouTubers outsource their scripting, which is like, to me, that blows my mind. I don't think I could read someone else's words on the channel. It would just be really, really weird. But other people, they're completely comfortable doing that. So for me, I would be open to the idea of having a coach, but it would probably be less structured than most coaching/client relationships.
What are some of the good things that people need to look for in a coach, in your opinion? Like, what makes a good coach, or what are some of the qualities?
I think a lot of people hire a coach based on what they look like. And I think that is somewhat relevant. If someone's like, I'm a hypertrophy specialist, expert guy, and they're just like, do you even lift? To me, that's a little bit of a red flag. So I do think it is relevant. On the other hand, it's probably not the most important thing, because you're not hiring someone for their genetics. They can't pass that on to you, unless you have a kid with them or something. Maybe they've done anabolics and, they look super impressive, but they can't pass that on to you either, unless you're willing to do that, which most people aren't, and rightfully so. So you're basically hiring someone for their expertise, for their knowledge. And so I would go based on that. I would, look at other people they've trained. I would, look at their content if they're putting out stuff on social media. And to me, if they're not dogmatic, that's a big important thing as well. So if someone is very like, this is my system, this is what you need to do, if it's not individualized to you at all, that is a big, big red flag. Like if someone is a high intensity training coach, like you're going to be doing one set, and then, you do the one set and it's all out, and you feel fine and you're not making progress and you feel like you could do more, and they're like, nope, one set, you just got to work harder. Like, you're not working hard enough, if you're not making progress. So I think it needs to be individualized to you. And, this is where if a coach has like a system, to me, that's a big red flag, because training is so individual that unless that system is fairly broad, it's just not going to cover everyone. Like, there are going to be outliers on the other side. And for me, if I do most just cookie cutter templates, it results in under training. It's just not enough work. It's not enough volume, particularly if it's like an RPE based system. It's just not enough work for me to grow, right? And so this is where individualization is absolutely essential.
That's extremely interesting. Yeah, you align with a lot of my thoughts on the topic as well. So it's great to hear them articulated and defined for people as well, because it seems that so many people are looking for coaches these days.
Oh.
And like you said, there's that people out there with their systems, and it truly is a cookie cutter industry. Everybody's doing the same program at the end of the day. So I just wanted to ask you about the new book that you've got coming out. Can you tell us what that's about and when it might be released?
Yeah, so it'll be the nutrition book. My first book was on training more for like beginners or intermediates, so more just general training. My second book was on rings. My third book was on, plateau busting, more for intermediates towards advanced. And then this one is going to be it's going to be focused on nutrition. So all things nutrition, not just, finding your macronutrients and stuff like that, but, more complicated stuff. It'll be very, very in depth. I'm not sure how many words it'll be. Probably 60, 80,000, could be closer to 100,000. I'm not sure. Because nutrition is a very big topic, and it'll also be more referenced than the previous 3 books, because the training books, you don't necessarily need to reference training, right? Because it's more just pretty obvious. Progressive overload, you don't necessarily need to have a bunch of scientific references for that. But nutrition, I think, will be more formally referenced, and it's going to be a lot of work. So it'll be longevity, it'll be health, it'll be performance, it'll be fat loss, it'll be muscle growth, it'll be strength. It'll be basically everything a lifter would want to know with regards to nutrition. It also won't be, telling people to eat a certain way. It'll just be, informing people of what might work for them. It's going to require experimentation, on the part of the reader. As with training, you have to experiment with regards to what diet is going to work for you. People rave about veganism. People rave about carnivore. So, it is super, super individual. It might go into myth busting as well. There's just so much BS in nutrition. There really is. Probably even more so than training. And so it'll be busting some myths, and it's a big topic. It'll be a lot of work, but I think it'll be hopefully out by the end of this year. Hopefully by November or maybe December of 2023.
Looking forward to it. You also mentioned in the last book that you were looking at maybe writing a book on specialization for certain body parts. Is that still in the works at all?
Yeah, that'll be after nutrition. I kind of wanted to break up the training books with one on nutrition. So yeah, the weak point correction book, which is already probably 15 or 20,000 words in, that'll probably be sometime 2024. And so that'll be almost like a continuation from Sweat, where it's more exercise focused, whereas Resurrecting Your Gains was more programming focused. So it'll be more specific, ways to bring up your lats, bring up your calves, bring up your traps, specific exercises, specific protocols, just ways to get over plateaus, not just holistically, but in terms of local hypertrophy.
I'm definitely looking forward to the chapter on arms myself. You seem to have like these next level world-class pro arms that I really want myself. After 30 years, I still haven't been able to develop anything new what you're sporting at the moment. So I'm definitely looking forward to both the nutrition book and anything else you release. I think you're a fantastic resource and a definite, I hate to use the word guru, but a definite positive influence in the industry. So I can only thank you again for coming on today. I'm sure a lot of people will get a lot of benefit from discussion that we've had. Is there anything else that you'd like to promote or discuss before we sign off for today?
No, I think that's a bit about it. Thank you for having me on. It's been a good conversation.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks very much again, Jeff.
Thank you.
Take care.